Macmillan Audio presents The Power of Women, written by Dr. Denis Mukwege, read by Dominic Hoffman. To my mother, my wife, my daughters, and my sisters. To all the victims of sexual violence. Introduction. It's unusual for a man to campaign for women's rights. I know this. I've sensed it during conversations with friends, at social gatherings, and occasionally in professional meetings. I've noted the uncomprehending looks and quizzical expressions. Every once in a while, I encounter hostility, whether open or implied. Some find my choices suspicious or even threatening. I remember dinner parties earlier in my career, in Congo and in Europe, when my turn would come to talk about my work. I would explain that I was a gynecologist who ran a hospital specializing in treating injuries caused by rape, and that I campaigned for women's rights. The table would fall quiet afterward, or someone would ask a polite follow-up question and then switch the subject of the conversation. In the moments of awkward silence, I could sense sympathy in the eyes of other guests, too. What terrible work! And how I must struggle with my identity, I imagined them thinking. I adopted a strategy of emphasizing how I was also happily married and had children, as if this would make me seem more normal or easier to relate to. Upon arriving back home afterward, I'd lie on my bed or in my hotel room, resenting that I'd felt the need to justify myself. This will be familiar to anyone who has felt the sting of not quite fitting in for reasons of origin, identity, or experience. At other times, people around me would be more blunt. I remember a conversation with an old friend of mine, a classmate from school who became a politician in my province. His words still stick in my mind all these years later. I feel like since you've been working on sexual violence, you've started thinking like a woman, he once told me. Though this should have been a compliment, it was not intended as such. I recall the flush of reassurance and kinship I felt when I first discovered the writings and work of Stephen Lewis, a Canadian diplomat and activist who has been a tireless campaigner for AIDS, HIV victims in Africa, and women's rights generally. Stephen made me realize that there were other men who thought as I did. I now count him as a dear friend. You might think that I no longer have to explain my choices after 2 decades of caring for and treating survivors of sexual violence, but you'd be wrong. And it's not only men who find it hard to understand. A few years ago, I attended a meeting with a senior figure at the United Nations in New York City. She agreed to receive me along with fellow campaigners working on women's rights and conflict resolution in my country, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We made our way to the upper floors of her building and were shown to her office, with its large meeting table and extraordinary views over the East River to Queens and Brooklyn beyond. I was caught off guard by an aggressive interrogation. "Why are you here talking about women's rights in Congo, rather than Congolese women?" Our host snapped at me from her place at the table. "Aren't there Congolese women who can speak for themselves?" The very reason I was there was to request that the UN support initiatives to promote women's voices in Congo. My hospital and foundation have helped survivors find strength and unity and supported individuals in developing their public speaking and advocacy skills. You will meet many of these inspiring women in this book. One might argue that the UN official was right to be on her guard against a man seeking to claim a platform for himself that belonged to women. That is a legitimate issue, and one that I am always happy to address. For my own part, whenever I have found myself questioned, at dinner parties or in UN offices, I return to my core convictions. I defend women because they are my equals.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?